Japan's master of curses, Edo no Seimei. Introduction: a city under a curse. Lightning splits the night above Kyoto. A palace hall burns. Officials fall sick. Children die in waves. The court whispers a forbidden name, Sugawara no Michizane. A scholar exiled to die in the south. A spirit said to return as thunder. One question tears through the capital: is this politics, or a curse? Keep your eyes open. Because in this story, fear writes the law. Part 1, The Curse of Sugawara no Michizane. Before he was a ghost, he was a prodigy. Sugawara no Michizane rose from a family of scholars to the highest ranks of government. He wrote poetry that stilled rooms. He read omens and managed state rites. He counseled emperors in an age when words could crown or destroy. And then the balance broke. Rivals moved. Accusations multiplied. Exile was the verdict. The road to Dazaifu in Kyushu swallowed him, far from the throne he once guarded. He died there, disgraced, untouchable, officially erased. Kyoto did not forget him. It could not. After his death, the sky and the streets turned against the court. Storms battered the capital. Plague crept through houses and left them silent. Flood swallowed fields along the river. Then lightning struck within the imperial precincts, an omen too sharp to ignore. High officials connected to his downfall died suddenly or lost heirs. The pattern felt personal. Every clap of thunder sounded like a name. The court had a word for such terror: Onmyoji. A vengeful dead. Not a wandering shade, but a force that punishes the living for betrayal. In Heian, Japan, that was not a ghost story, it was a policy problem. Ignore an Onmyoji, and you risk a city's loyalty, a harvest, a dynasty. Acknowledge it, and you must rewrite the past. That is what the court did. They undid the verdict. Decrees reversed the accusations. Michizane received a posthumous pardon, then titles, then honor. But a pardon on paper cannot chain a storm. So the court took the next step: pacification. They gave the spirit a new name and a place to dwell. Kenjin, heavenly deity. God of scholarship, protector of learning, the rightful home of a furious mind. A shrine rose for him in Kyoto, its precincts fed by offerings and fear. Priests spoke his new name in rites of appeasement. Officials bowed, not as judges absolving a man, but as subjects pleading with a power larger than law. Festivals carried his image through streets that once cursed him. Children cheered. Candles eroded into pools of wax. And the city breathed a little easier when storms passed without lightning striking the palace again. Do not mistake this for superstition on the margins. These were state acts, written into the machinery of rule. When the court erased guilt, raised a shrine, and elevated a ghost to a god, it admitted a hard truth: politics could not survive without ritual. Justice could be revised, but peace had to be purchased. The government learned to manage fear as carefully as grain and taxes. If an Onryo could topple ministers, then pacifying an Onryo was public safety. Listen to how the story rearranged memory. Traitor became patron. Enemy became guardian. The same pen that once condemned Michizane now wrote prayers to him. That reversal was not weakness, it was technology, an early form of crisis control. The capital survived because it knew when to bend. And still the people remembered the edge beneath the new name. Kenjin brought blessings to students and poets, yes. But thunder remained his voice. A flicker of lightning across the northern sky could still taste like an accusation. Even in honor, a god may keep a fist. This is why the curse matters. It shows how fear and belief hardwired themselves into the bones of the state. It explains why later disasters would be measured not only in debt and coin, but in omens and rituals. It sets the stage for the man the court would need next, a specialist in reading the sky and binding the unseen. A figure who could hold a city together with ink, earth, and breath. Edo no Seimei. Part 2, Edo no Seimei, Japan's master of curses. The storm had a name. But to survive, the court needed more than shrines and pardons. They needed someone who could read the hidden script of heaven, someone who could calculate the flow of unseen forces and cut the knots of disaster. That name was Edo no Seimei. Born in the mid-10th century, Seimei rose from an obscure family line into the most powerful diviner of his age. He trained in astronomy, calendar science, and the lore of yin and yang. But his reputation came from what people whispered: that he commanded spirit servants bound by spells, that he read fortunes with a glance, that he walked unharmed where other men heard curses in the wind. To the emperors and regents of Kyoto, Seimei was not an entertainer. He was insurance. When strange deaths struck the court, he was consulted. When the stars formed ominous patterns, he recalculated calendars to reset fate. When accusations of witchcraft or betrayal surfaced, his judgment carried the weight of law. In a city where storms could be called curses, Seimei was the firewall. But his work was not random spellcasting. He stood at the center of a government office, the Bureau of Onmyo, the Department of Yin and Yang. This was a state institution, not a back alley shrine. It managed calendars, weather prediction, geomancy, and exorcism. To rule Japan, you needed tax ledgers and rice, yes. But you also needed men who could time rituals, identify taboos, and redirect the anger of spirits. Seimei was the one man trusted to command that machine. Legends say he outwitted rival sorcerers, that he sealed curses with a flick of a brush, that even demons avoided his shadow. But the records show something more striking. He advised the most powerful regents of the Fujiwara clan for decades, longer than most generals survived in battle. That means his skill was not only feared, it was respected as reliable. You do not keep a fraud in the palace for 50 years. You keep the man who saves your throne. Seimei's fame grew so large that even after death, people feared his absence. His house in Kyoto became a shrine. His star-shaped seal, the pentagram, still marks wards and charms across Japan. To speak his name was to invoke order against chaos. And behind the stories lies a deeper pattern. Japan was beginning to think of cities themselves as living bodies that required protection. Not only shrines, not only prayers, but entire landscapes designed as spells. This is where Seimei's work flows into the idea of barriers, the hidden nets of magic said to shield Kyoto, Edo, and even modern Tokyo. Part 3, The Hidden Barrier of Kyoto. Kyoto was not only a capital of politics. It was a capital of design, designed as a spell. When the court planned the city in the late 8th century, they did not simply draw streets and walls. They mapped Kyoto according to yin-yang cosmology and the 4 celestial beasts. The Kamo River flowed along the east, the domain of the Blue Dragon. To the west stretched ancient roads, the realm of the White Tiger. Southward opened fields beneath the Vermilion Bird. And to the north rose Mount Funaoka, the shell of the Black Tortoise. The 4 guardians encircled the city like an invisible army. This was not metaphor. It was defense. The theory was called Shijinsu, 4 gods in correspondence. It meant a city protected by balance, each direction anchored by sacred geography. But geography shifts. Storms flood rivers, mountains erode, enemies march. So the Heian court enforced the balance with temples and shrines. Each placement was deliberate, a shrine here to fortify the east, a temple there to seal the north, layers of wards that made Kyoto a fortress of faith. At the city's heart lay the Imperial Palace, the pivot of power. Its gates faced south, aligned with cosmic law. But what mattered most were the boundaries unseen, forbidden directions, unlucky days, streets blocked to prevent spiritual contamination. Even the movement of officials and the timing of ceremonies followed calculations of yin and yang. Kyoto was not just a residence of emperors. It was a ritual device, a living barrier. The system reached beyond the palace. When disasters struck, new shrines rose to mend the balance. When omens soured, geomancers redrew invisible lines across the city. In this sense, Kyoto was never finished. It was rewritten each time fear demanded fresh protection. Legends say Edo Seimei himself walked these streets, placing wards at crossroads, burying talismans under stones, redirecting the flow of unseen currents. Some of these sites became permanent shrines, like Seimei Jinja, where his star seal still gleams above gates. Others dissolved into memory, known only by rumor. What remains constant is the idea. Kyoto was not simply defended by armies. It was defended by belief. A web of barriers invisible to the eye but heavy with meaning. And the model set in Heian times would echo centuries later, when another city rose to power, Edo, the castle that became Tokyo. Part 4, The Edo Fortress of Magic. Centuries after Kyoto's founding, power shifted east. The Tokugawa shoguns built their capital at Edo, today's Tokyo. But they did not rely only on walls and moats. They inherited the old fear. Disaster was not only political, it was spiritual. And so Edo became a fortress of magic. The shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu studied Kyoto's model. He understood that a city must be shielded not only from armies but from curses, vengeful spirits, and the malice of unlucky directions. He rebuilt Edo Castle with more than stone. He wove a net of shrines and temples, each placed with precision, each acting as a lock on the unseen. Look to the northeast, the dreaded Kimon, the Demon Gate. In geomancy, this was the most vulnerable direction. To seal it, Ieyasu's successors raised Kane-ji, modeled on Kyoto's Inryaku-ji, the temple of Mount Hiei. Monks stood guard not just with prayers but with placement, an anchor to block whatever sought entry from the demon's road. Closer still, Onmyoji rose to guard the same northeast quarter, its kami protecting warriors, merchants, and the shogun himself. Together, temple and shrine formed a wall of spirit against invisible attack. On the opposite side, to the southwest, the rear demon gate, the Ura-Kimon, stood high shrine. It balanced the city's flow, ensuring no opening remained unguarded. Thus the castle sat cradled between shrines, its angles hardened not only by stone but by faith. Yet this was only the beginning. Around the city the Tokugawa placed the five-color Fudo, 5 temples dedicated to different forms of Fudo Myoo, the immovable king. Black, white, blue, red, yellow, each station a guardian, each color a thread and a net drawn across Edo. To move through the city was to move through an invisible mandala, a diagram of protection spread across streets and rivers. For the people, these shrines and temples were sites of prayer, festivals, and blessings. For the shogunate, they were also barriers, an insurance policy written in stone and incense. If Kyoto had been a ritual device, Edo was a fortress disguised as a city. The castle itself, with its moats and walls, stood as the physical heart of this system. But the greater shield was intangible, a network of sacred sites aligned to neutralize threats before they reached the shogun's gate. Earthquakes, epidemics, rebellion, none could be explained without omens, and none could be fought without wards. And when Edo fell in 1868, when the Tokugawa surrendered to the new imperial government, the shrines and temples did not vanish. The castle was renamed. Its grounds became the Imperial Palace. But the spiritual barrier remained. What once guarded a shogun now guards an emperor. What once encircled a castle now encircles the capital of modern Japan. To walk Tokyo today is to tread within that same net. The shrines still stand. The temples still rise. The colors of the 5 Fudo still glimmer in incense smoke. The magic that held Edo still hums beneath the pavement, a lattice of faith so old that most who live inside it no longer notice. The question is not whether the barrier exists. The question is whether it is still working. Part 5, From Edo Castle to the Imperial Palace. The shoguns are gone. The castle has fallen. But the barrier remains. When the Meiji government rose in the late 19th century, it did not erase Edo's spiritual grid. It inherited it. The new rulers turned Edo Castle into the Imperial Palace, the home of the emperor reborn as modern sovereign. Stone walls were rebuilt, gardens remade, but the shrines and temples around the palace kept their posts. The guardians of Edo became the guardians of Tokyo. Think of the geography. To the northeast still stand Kanei-ji and Onmyoji, the paired locks on the demon gate. To the southwest still rises High Shrine, protector against the rear opening. Together they form a triangle around the palace, just as they did around the shogun. Add to this the circle of the 5-color Fudo, and you find the same invisible mandala spread across Tokyo's core. For the people of the city, these are sites of worship, festivals, New Year's prayers. But for those who know the old designs, they are still a barrier. Every visit, every offering, every bell struck in the dark, feeds power back into the net. Some say this is coincidence, shrines surviving by tradition, nothing more. But others note how disasters often strike hardest outside the circle. Earthquakes, fires, floods, Tokyo has suffered them all, yet the heart of the city, the palace and its immediate grounds, has often escaped the worst. Is this chance? Or the echo of an older defense system still doing its work? Legends whisper that the palace itself is more than residence. It is the anchor of a spiritual machine begun in Kyoto, perfected in Edo, and carried into Tokyo. A system meant to contain not only enemies, but curses, ghosts, and chaos itself. Look at the skyline today, steel towers, neon lights, trains rushing beneath streets. It feels modern, unshakable. But beneath it lies an architecture of faith, a network of guardians placed centuries ago. The emperor's home is not simply a palace. It is the eye of the barrier. And the city around it still lives in the shadow of spells. The question is not whether we believe in curses. The question is whether curses still believe in us. Part 6, Ending, Japan's Living Spell. It begins with a curse. A scholar exiled, a storm unleashed, a name whispered in fear, Sugawara no Michizane. His rage forced a government to bend, forced ministers to rewrite the law, forced shrines to rise in apology. From his shadow, Japan learned that politics alone could not rule. It needed ritual. It needed magic. Then came Edo Seimei. Not a soldier, but a sorcerer. Not a general, but a master of the unseen. He read the heavens, sealed curses, placed wards in the streets of Kyoto. He turned a capital into a device of protection. He proved that power was not only steel and tax but the control of fear, the redirection of fate. Kyoto became a city of barriers. Edo became a fortress of shrines and temples. And when Edo fell, its fortress did not. The Imperial Palace still beats at the heart of Tokyo, encircled by guardians old and new. The grid remains. The spell endures. So we ask again. Was this only superstition? Or was it an ancient technology, a system of control written into the very map of Japan? Because even now, when thunder shakes the city, when shrines draw crowds to pray for safety, when the palace gates close at dusk, the old logic breathes. The curse became a god. The sorcerer became a legend. The fortress became a capital. And the barrier still hums beneath our feet. This is the legacy of Japan's master of curses. This is the spell that never broke.